You want me to hold or what?
Folks, welcome back inside the Parisi Palace here, 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And this next interview is one of the reasons that I do my show. Still very active, still very strong, leading the way without being the leader. Years of giving back, making wine and playing their butts off. It started some time ago when my two guests found their way to Sacramento at a time when the city was buzzing with nightlife at Dave's Soul Kitchen, where my guests learned how to play funky soul grooves and against the time. They played off each other, taking the late show and then the late show. While parishioners were heading off to church, my guests were going home to grab some shut-eye before waking up and swinging all over again. One of my guests played with Don Costa and Edyie Gorme, the other with Bobby Hutcherson, Herbie Hancock, and Vince Guaraldi. Both held it down with Jerry Garcia. And unlike other musicians who may have had a great run for 3 or 5 or 10 years, both my guests today still have the chops to play in all different musical settings with all different musicians. Two brothers, Mike Clark and Bill Vitt, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
What's up, man?
How you doing, everybody?
Hey, all right. Is Bill, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, man.
Hey, Mike. What's happening, man?
You know, Mike, I wanted to ask you, could you talk to the audience about being on Jam Cruise and playing with, not just playing with George Porter, but actually showing up at a 3:45 a.m. session for Bill Vitt and what your thoughts were about that?
Well, I was actually on the cruise playing with Grant Green Jr. and Lonnie Smith and several guys. That was the main band that we were doing. We did it 2 times a day. So I had heard that Bill had got a hold of me and told me he was going to be on the ship. So we ran into each other, either eating or something like this, and hung out a little bit. So I went to a show. Naturally, I wanted to hear what he was doing. I went to a show, and it was killing. I loved it. I mean, he, I'm not a big labeling person, but the band sounded like it was a good band. It sounded like a funk band of some kind. But Bill was playing as if it was Bitch's Brew, and this type of thing, and it modernized the entire band. Instead of the 2 and 4 backbeat thing, it was so interesting that I stayed for the whole show. I mean, I live in New York, and I can hear every giant that's ever played every night, and I never stay. I mean, Lenny White, I'll stay for his show. Al Foster. I stayed for the whole show because I dug what was happening so much. Bill had taken it to another understanding,
Can you?
And I think it's a generational thing. Like a lot of guys now play, just regular, what I call, not everybody does it, regular funk, 2 and 4 backbeat, the stuff we grew up on, stacks type of thing and everything. But our generation was more. We were jazz musicians who played funk to make a living, not funk musicians who played jazz. This was, at least that's how it laid for me.
I just want to, I want to talk to tell the audience, Mike. How emotional. I mean, I didn't cry, but it was when I talked to Billy Vitt, he said, Mike called me at 5:45 in the morning and told me that he was blown away by my set, how I played, and I just think. To me, that's a testament. Yeah, it's a testament to the humanity of both of you, just being really decent individuals. But it's also authentic. I mean, the truth is that you both were jazz players, and you both knew how to swing a band, and then you were able to incorporate funk into that. But Mike, I think it's great because you continue to carry on the lineage and the brotherhood. To me, it's just beautiful. Billy, I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first time or can you talk about a great story about the first time you saw Mike Clark swinging the band in Sacramento?
I don't remember exactly that was back in the 60s. And, we were still, both of us, that's back when the nightclubs were all happening. So there was something going on all the time in 8 or 10 different clubs every night of the week. And so I dropped by Mike's gig, and he'd come by mine. And, it's basically R&B, funk-oriented R&B. But Mike, I remember one thing. I remember before Mike left, I think he was living in Oakland at the time. This is after we both moved, in the Bay Area. But
sure.
I remember Mike telling me, he said, "Hey, man, I want to play jazz. I'm moving to New York." And that was like a suit. I'll never forget that. That was exactly what I wanted to do. And we were both Tony Williams freaks. I think Mike and I could probably played those records over and over, those Miles records, when Tony was with the band. So that was, but at the time, I just, I said, God, that guy's got a lot of balls, man. I'm going to move to New York and play jazz, period. And he did it. I have a lot of respect for him for following through, and you have a dream and you follow it, and that's what he did. And Sacramento was back in the old. I think Mike probably Dave's Soul Kitchen was kind of that was where I got my PhD in playing drums. Was playing after hours at Dave's Soul Kitchen on and off for years, and it was just a swinging.
And you know what? I saw Frosty in there too. I heard you play in there. Remember Frosty with Lee Michaels? Frosty used to play in Soul Dave's.
Yeah.
I throw that in. Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
I think it's. Go ahead.
And this was right in Oak Park, right after they had these serious riots, and we'd be like the only white guys in the club. And Soul Dave, the owner, was a big guy, and he would tell you, "Don't mess with Bill," And so I never got hassled there. And they had hot links. They had soul food. You'd come in at 2 a.m. But it was just hot, hardcore swing, and that's where I learned how to play drums. And I was a music major in college and all that kind of stuff, and blah blah blah. But that's where I learned how to play. And after my gig at 2 a.m, I'd go right over there and start playing drums at the Dave's Soul Kitchen. And I usually had the spot playing drums. It was kind of the house drummer for quite a while, but that was all happened. And Mike, you remember that? That's a hot place.
Mike, can you talk a little bit?
Can you talk? The Momo Club, the Maharaja, the Mahjong, the Dave's Soul Kitchen, and Dave's Soul Kitchen was the hang, of course. And I saw, and Ray Torres. Remember Ray, Bill?
Oh yeah, man.
Ray. Oh man, Ray would play with Leo Valentine and Marcus Rivers in a Junior Walker type trio, and Ray played a mess of drums. Man, he was a fantastic drummer. And every night the Momo Club was on. I worked all those rooms for years. I worked him in right up until even when I was with Herbie, I'd go back and play those joints. Dave's was closed, but some of the other ones were still running. And I played with LaWanda Page, who played Aunt Esther on Red Fox.
Wow. Red
Fox had there was a Skillet Leroy and LaWanda. We did the Chitlin circuit, and it was LaWanda Page, and they do jokes, and we had an organ trio. And we would play Mr. D's on Cadillac Row, but we just, a lot of great stuff and a lot of great learning ground. And we played, fast tempos and jazz all night, and some funk, Grant Green style, all this stuff. We used to play Sookie Sookie, one of Grant Green's tunes. And back when I first met Bill, though, dig this. I remember Bill was playing out at the Roadhouse, an organ joint, a jazz joint out in West Sac. And I was playing down the street at a club called Dandy's with a soul singer named Big Joe Hicks, who did some recording for Stax.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I went to hear Bill, and the next day we were hanging over at Bill's crib, and he said, and we used to listen to Cannonball a lot, and Louis Hayes. I remember Down at the Lighthouse was a big one we were listening to. And we talk about drums and this and that. And Bill went over and said, well, come on with me. And we went over to the cleaners, to a laundry, and he picked up his shirts. And I'd never seen him. I was only 16 or 17. We were young guys, you know. I mean, I guess I was out of the house. I was already living alone, and I must have been 17. But he had his shirts done by a cleaners, and they were all inside a plastic bag. And I'd never seen any young guys do that before. So, hey, Bill, I want you to know that I'm still getting my shirts done at cleaners, even when I don't have the bread, because I saw you in 1965.
That's progress, baby.
I love it. Hey, Mike.
You know, you got to live. Anyway, what did Duke Ellington say? If you have your last $10, go buy a steak, treat yourself good, right?
Mike, I want to ask you something about, this. You've been in New York now for a while. I mean, just following you on new media, you're playing in all different settings. What would be? Do you feel like the clubs, the Mahjong and the Momos and Dave's Soul Kitchen, the ability for you to just get into a live setting and have to play with cats allowed you to develop your own sound? I mean, I know it just seems to me, even in New York, it's harder for younger cats. You know, you guys were Tony Williams fanatics. Well, Tony Williams would play 6 nights a week at the Village Gate with Miles to get loose, to start to feel, to know how to incorporate all these different sounds. Is it harder today for people to develop their own individual sound because of that lack of venues?
Well, I think what's happening nowadays is, first of all, I want to tell you that, just let me put this in there.
Sure.
Have you heard the Wolf and Clark Expedition 2, the new one with Christian McBride and you were mentioning? We just have it out. We've been in the top 10 for 8 weeks now.
Wow,
so
and I haven't heard it yet. Okay.
Daryl Johns. Yeah, the reason I'm saying that is because you were asking me about New York. That's pretty much what I've been doing. Is that record right there reflects what I've been doing for the past, since 1977 or something. But I think the apprenticeship is over with. Like, I was able to apprentice with, Joe Henderson and these different people, Mose Ellis, and all the different guys I played with. And you learn from the Woody Shaw I played with for years and guys like that. They talk to you, and you learn. I didn't get it in college. I learned it from those guys and from what they tell you what to do and what not to do. And you'd also watch them and figure it out for yourself. I think that's how I developed my own mishmash of, I'm definitely, every drummer that I've ever heard is part of my background. I'm really into Elvin. I'm really into Tony, Mickey Roker, Tootie Heath, Jimmy Cobb, the Philly Joe, Max, all the way back to Zudi. And it's like, I don't think you can get that apprenticeship nowadays. So they do, I think, guys get it off records. And I think also a lot of the guys I hear, the lineage was somewhere broken. So a lot of guys start now and they kind of have fusion kind of chops or a funk kind of background. And then if they land on jazz gigs, they can make a living there because most of these guys are really good drummers. But that part of the lineage is what I miss. And I think that comes, you can't get it so much off records because the records sound polite. Like when I heard Philly Joe, I knew him a little bit. And when I go hear him live in New York, he was raising hell. It wasn't real clean and polite like the records. So I hear a lot of polite, kind of like the Mayweather fight. It's pretty polite. You know what I mean? And the alternative to that is loud fusion or something. So I'm not saying it's across the board. There's a lot of musicians in the world doing a lot of different things. But I think that chain between Charlie Parker's schematic somehow has gotten pretty lost. And so they start now, and they kind of start from wherever, and they just start playing, and they're good, and that's the end of it.
So yeah, you're saying that's
how I feel about it. I think the apprenticeship helped me keep the tradition in the shit, no matter how out I go.
They can keep time, but there's almost a politeness. There's almost it's too clean. Billy, you want to chime in there? Do you want to talk a little bit? Because I mean, when I hear you and Mike play on all your stuff, I mean there's just so many variations. I just saw Billy up in near Mesa a couple weeks ago, and we're playing like this sort of funk groove, and then it goes into a bolero kind of Latin feel. Billy, why don't we? Can I get your take on this idea of politeness in the drumming world of today?
Well, yeah, that's actually a very cool word. I've never thought of it that way, but to me. I wanted to bring something up that it's not so polite. First of all, I was flashing on. I'd moved to L.A. for 3 years back in the 60s and worked in the studios. I actually was very successful because I made a connection with Don Costa and blah, blah, blah. And I got a lot of gigs. So anyway, but on Monday nights, I'd go down to the Parisian Room. And it was a jam session. It was like Dave's Soul Kitchen. It started out, late at night. It started with an organ trio. And then the players would come in and sit in. And so here's a little white boy, me. I'm really young, and I walk in, and, you guys say, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm a drummer. And they said, oh, really? So what they do, when you finally get to get up and play, they play this really super up tune, like pop, 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 pop. And if you can't get through that, you're off the stage. And you'll never play there again.
That's right.
So, anyway, that's what happened to me. It's somehow, you talk about just playing time. Well, that's one time I just had to keep my right hand going to keep up with the band, And there were great musicians. There was a line of horn players, and they all played like Charlie Parker. I mean, it was just incredible place. And I think it's still there. I was asking somebody when I was in L.A. last time, and they said, yeah, I think that place is still there. But the polite thing, it's kind of like doing sessions where this is my take on it, where, you could do your thing, but there's you have to stay within certain bounds. And, of course, the time thing's got to be really, just totally, it's got to be there. But you can't go up beyond a certain line. I think Herbie Hancock, once he called it the comfort zone. And, it's like we feel real safe, but, you're doing somebody else's music sometimes. You have to conform to what they want. And that's what you do. And to me, that's the take I got on playing politely.
Right.
But anyway, that's my take on it. And then, there are places like where you can really stretch out. And, of course, I have a little gig with a lady named Judy Hall, a really great pianist from New York that I play gigs with her in her trio. And that gives me a chance to stretch out because she's got really good, her syncopation, all her, she's really a good player. So that kind of keeps me moving. And you always got to have a jazz gig. That's what I believe in. And that's what I do here besides doing my other things. But
hey, Mike.
At any rate,
no,
I hope I got the right interpretation on that.
No, we're ripping it up, Mike. You talk about the apprenticeship part of it. Do you feel like younger cats are willing to listen today? I sometimes I get the impression, I read a lot of your stuff, and it seems to me there's like you get a little bit down sometimes because there's like a dismissive quality amongst younger cats because they're not really open to the apprenticeship side of it. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, I think that my feeling on that, I've heard a lot of great young musicians. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I'm not one of those guys that's bugged about anything. I like my life and I dig what's happening. But no, I don't think. My feeling is most of the masters that I learned from are dead. So so there is no way to get that particular flavor, except off records. And so I just noticed that, like, me and Lenny White, the drummer, are writing a book about this right now. I've noticed that there's been some kind of a break in the
lineage.
In the lineage from the past till now. And that doesn't mean you have to play old style. I certainly don't. I play as jagged and as whatever I feel like playing. So I'm not. I do like to. So I'm missing part of the tradition. I'm missing the blues. I'm missing a lot of the, the language. It's a language, and a lot of guys know what each other's saying. Like if you play with Buster Williams or those guys, they know what you're talking about because you're speaking a language. No matter how jagged or weird you speak it, they understand what you're saying. And part of that, and that doesn't mean that you have to stay in 1950 or 60s or any of this type of thing. But and I'm not even on a campaign about it. But I feel that that's what made jazz swing. If it don't swing, then I don't care how much chops you got. Saying that, I do like a lot of the technical innovations I see from the young guys. I mean, there's a lot of guys kind of playing the same stuff, but I do hear some cats out there that are bringing in there. You know what I mean? Like on the drum side, I'm just talking chops now. Like there's some new stuff on the scene, and it's like I like it. You know what I mean? I'm listening to it and I like it. And on the funk side, these guys are really good. I think what happened with the Headhunters and Mahavishna, Return to Forever, I think I certainly didn't mean to. When I did the Headhunters, I was just trying to pay rent. I was very, very glad to be in Herbie Hancock's band, but I was still constantly had my eye open for jazz gigs. And as most of us at that time did. And I think we ended up inadvertently, unwittingly influencing a lot of people. So like if a guy starts drumming today and he starts with Dennis Chambers and he develops a bunch of, like Dennis is a friend of mine, I think Dennis is brilliant, he develops a bunch of drumming facility that's incredible, then it would be, if I heard that guy on a jazz gig, it would be, there's more to jazz than going ding, ding, a ding on the cymbal, playing a ride beat, and stacking up all of those groupings that guys are playing now against it. And a lot of those groupings, the poly thing, doesn't really fit in the language of jazz. That's why a lot of it sounds square. Like if you come to New York, some of my students have they can play the drum set incredibly, and they'll fit in on a jazz gig, and the other jazz musicians won't really like playing with them, and they don't understand why, because they can play so fast and so many licks and such incredible speed. And they don't go, well, how come the guy didn't like me? I'm great. So you know, it's like if you play Latin music, I can't go on a real Latin gig because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't have enough understanding of the clave. When the piano player is this, you play a 3-2 or a 2-3. I don't have all that. So it would be like a guy coming on a jazz gig that doesn't have the language. You have to speak some of the language. This is my opinion. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's how I feel.
Billy Vitt, can you tell me a good Mike Clark story about how you guys used to work the scene together and make sure that you guys were the resident drummers of Cowtown?
Well, you know, there's one story I'll never forget. This is actually not a musical story per se.
That's okay.
But Mike came to one of my gigs, and he sat with these two beautiful sisters, right? And when I got off the stage in the break, all of a sudden these sisters were like all over me. And anyway, I ended up hanging out with one of them. She ended up being my girlfriend for a while, actually. And I said, well, what happened? She said, well, Mike told us that you were the coolest cat in town, and on and on and on and on, and just built me up on this big pedestal, right? So, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, man. God, they must really dig drummers. I don't know. But that was kind of funny. And I don't know whether I ever came to one of his gigs and repaid that favor, but it was kind of a thing I thought was really cool.
You can do that anytime. You can do that anytime you want, Bill. I'll accept.
But another thing, you know, Mike was talking.
Continue.
Mike was talking about Ray Torres.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's he was a great drummer. I think you told me he passed away, Mike, but you know, back in the day, he was in Sacramento, man. He was one of the cats for sure. He just played a nice laid-back funk in the pocket, just tasty stuff, you know. And he's one of the guys I remember from Sacramento. And you know, Vince Latiato, that's been in the city, San Francisco, for a long time. He's an ex-Sacramento guy. There's a few guys around it. Sacramento used to have a pretty cool music scene, actually. There was a lot of gigs, a lot of, you know, jazz clubs. It was a pretty happening place back then. But anyway, that's one of the stories that I will never forget with Mike being at my gig.
Yeah, actually, Vince was the one that connected me with Mike Clark originally. So that, I mean, it's a brotherhood. You know, Mike, I was going to ask you as we wrap up here. How much fun was it to play "Get Out of My Life, Woman" with George Porter Jr. on that jam cruise?
How many times?
No, how much fun was it?
Well, that's about as much fun as a human can have on Earth, because whoever likes soul music, George knows that I love that song. So he had asked me to come to one of his clinics and play the drums while he was demonstrating things. And he looked at me and gave me that big George Porter smile, and he could really sing the heck out of Get Out of My Life, Woman. And if I'm not mistaken, he might have been the bass player on the track with Lee Dorsey. I'm not sure. I think maybe he told me that, or I heard that, or, something. But, yeah, man, there's a blues guitarist I used to play with. We used to play with Otis Rush. You remember Otis Rush?
Mm-hmm.
And he used to turn around when we'd be playing, we'd play a shuffle, and if it was really laying up in there good, he'd turn around and here we are making $50, playing 6 sets in those days. This is at Tramps in the 80s in New York. And he'd turn around and say, "It don't get no better than this." I have a quick Bill Vitt story.
Please.
Can I tell it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. All right, dig. I went into a club. Hey, Bill, there was a club where B.B. King and everybody used to play. It was on the backside of, heading over by San Quentin when you'd go through Richmond. Do you remember that club?
Oh, it's ringing a bell. Yes.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Well, anyway, I went in there one night to see you, and it was a straight-up funk band, like a soul group with, singers and horns and everything. It was quite a good band. And Bill was playing the funky thing, but he was playing drums like Tony Williams style while this was going on. I mean, he was breaking it up and doing all these intense ideas and blasting all over but it was all super musical, and I was floored. I'd never thought about doing the funk thing like that before, not with singers and everything. And nobody, not only did nobody mind or get bugged that he was blown, because sometimes guys, the singers didn't understand when drummers were really polyed up and breaking it all up. They were loving what Bill was doing. And I was in the house with a partner of mine, and we were digging, and I was saying, man, Bill is blowing his socks off, man. That was an intense, and so what I did was went back to my gig with Vince Guaraldi, which was supposed to be kind of a Wynton Kelly gig. I used to try to sound like Jimmy Cobb or those guys, and I just upped my Tony thing all the way on Guaraldi's gig. And after hearing Bill do that, and Guaraldi was looking back at me, going like with a big, huge question mark, like, "What the hell are you doing, man?" You know what I mean? And then he got used to it, and he liked it.
Well, I got to tell you guys.
Anyway,
I want to listen. For me, when I started this journey 4 years ago, you two were two of my earliest guests. You've allowed me to find my voice. You've affected thousands of people through your music, but you're also awesome human beings. And to know that you guys have known each other and collaborated for, my gosh, decades, and it goes way back when. I really just like to be able to bring you two together. And we'll do it again soon, and just keep swinging your butts off, and we'll do it again. Much love to you guys. Thank you.
Hey, see you, Mike.
Thank you, Jake. I deeply appreciate that.
All right. We'll be right back on the Jake Feinberg Show.